While PFL and One Championship are burning through borrowed millions to act like they can compete with the UFC, Rizin has recently brought back hope for Japanese MMA, with former Rizin flyweight champion Kaya Asakura getting an immediate UFC title shot in his debut. It makes you wonder why the UFC would have done this, when so recently they have set a hardline stance against cross-promoting with the PFL. Even though it technically wasn't a cross-promotion, a champion from another organization getting an immediate title shot is as close to a cross-promotion as we are going to get. But still, why now? Yuri held the light heavyweight Rizin belt, but he had to get 2 brutal knockouts before getting the title shot when he was clearly the biggest star in the division. Manel Camp also held the Rizin flyweight belt, and ironically was coming off of a KO win over Kai Asakura, and he had to fight Pantoja in his debut, who was ranked number 5 at the time. Even though Kai lost, why would the UFC choose to try to prop up another champion like they did and when they did it? Number 1, a possible 105-pound division. And Rizin is the only organization with a legit atomweight division, and possibly the best female fighter, Sika Izawa. She is an undefeated champion at 14-0, with half of her wins coming by sub. And only 27 years old, Dana could see the same opportunity as he did with Ronda, but only with a Japanese star that brings a whole country with her. She dominates her fights and always uses forward pressure and strikes to set up her world-class ground game. I can see Dana doing what he did with the strawweight division. He did not buy Invicta completely, but he bought the contracts of the top 15 fighters in the world at strawweight. I can see Dana doing this with Rizin, because the only MMA promoter Dana White gets along with is former Pride president and current Rizin president. Number 2, a possible ESPN deal. With PFL selling only 10,000 buys for their first pay-per-view, I really hope somebody at ESPN doesn't have a brain aneurysm and resigns them. You can tell that Dana's competitive juices only get flowing at the blackjack table and when he talks about PFL. Only problem is Dana has no one to actually compete with. If Rizin came to ESPN Plus, you would have a competing product that actually does something different. And their marketing campaign is great fights, not we're the next UFC. With PFL 1 and Bellator copying how the UFC runs a show with a sports-like feel, Rizin goes completely against the grain in a very refreshing way. It's a spectacle. No, we don't get to see the matches with huge weight discrepancies like back in the day with Pride, but we do have yellow cards and traditional Pride rules, so the fights are higher paced, and Japan doesn't care if you win or lose as long as you fight to the end. They will bring back guys with 5-5 records because they come to kill or be killed, not to try to win a decision. Rizin even does one-night Grand Prix, which is something I really wish the UFC would do. The PFL isn't even smart enough to take what already works. They try to create their whole scoring system with a whole season thing, and it's just not exciting at all. ESPN MMA YouTube even posted most of Kai's Rizin's fights before the fight with Pantoja, and they did good numbers. The only thing holding Rizin back from an ESPN deal, in my opinion, is at the time of the fights, they would be in the middle of the night. But with streaming services how they are now, unlike the Pride days, they can rebroadcast the event, prime time, as many times as they want, with no money and little risk. The moral of the story is if ESPN re-signs PFL, somebody should go into a psych ward. Reason 3. With the likes of Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Alex Pereira, and Eddie Alvarez only to name a few, Dana has come to realize the power of these, shall we say, plug-and-play stars. People who against all odds gain traction outside the UFC with an exciting fighting style that can become superstars with the UFC marketing machine. When they brought Pride and started bringing the stars over to the UFC, it wasn't to uplift the Pride stars to American stardom. It was to prove that the UFC was the best. Now that they have proven that, they can start actually building Japanese stars. The Japanese MMA fighters who post YouTube videos already get higher views than all of the champions. With Dana needing a new strategy in the Asian market, a deal with Rizin to bring their stars to the UFC could be UFC's road back to Japan. They could finally give us the first Japanese UFC champion, and that one thing would bring Rizin to the height of Pride and bring a new golden age to MMA. Rizin has a huge card coming up next week. Just like Pride, they do a big New Year's Eve show every year, but this one feels different. It's called Rizin Decade, and coming off of the Kai title fight, I think this will be their biggest and best card yet. Headlined by a featherweight title fight between Chaho Suzuki and Kleber Erbst. This is a rematch. Kleber missed weight in their first fight, but still subbed Suzuki with an armbar. Since the fight was in Japan and he missed weight, the fight was turned to a no contest. Let me know what you think about that rule in the comments, and if you want it to be in the UFC or not. I absolutely love it. Suzuki is a wild striker with a record of 13-3 and 7 wins coming by knockout. He's a boxer puncher just like Kaya Asakura. His breakout win was a round 1 KO over Patricio Pitbull. Even though he started by overextending on his punches and getting a little too excited, he was able to settle down and finish off Pitbull faster than anyone other than AJ McKee, and that was a submission. Off the Pitbull fight, he got a title shot, and the fact that this isn't the most talked about finish of all time is disgusting. After getting hit with a big straight and taken down, Suzuki was able to make enough space to land a devastating upkick before finishing his opponent from punches from the bottom, showing he will always go for the finish no matter his position. With Topuria and Max leaving the division and Volk at the end of his career, the UFC is about to have a mass exodus at featherweight. And in desperate need for stars to fight the likes of Diego Lopez and all the other prospects, they should look at Suzuki. Rizin has so much faith in Suzuki that they even try to book him in an exhibition boxing match with Pacquiao. He's also on an 8-fight win streak, and I see no better way to screw Mosvar than giving Suzuki an immediate title fight. Rizin has also decided that it's time to give their 18-year-old 7-0 prospect a big step up. He turned pro at the age of 16 and has Kai Asakura in his corner. He has learned from his teammates' mistakes. His defense is some of the best I've ever seen in MMA. His head movement and blocks seem to be ahead of his opponent's strikes, like a prime Anderson Silva, and the way he controls distance is fantastic. His hands are heavy, especially for not even being fully grown yet. He has 4 KOs, and 3 of those came in the first round. He is also very well rounded, showing off takedowns and great top control. I can see why Rizin is putting him in the spotlight on their biggest show of the year. But his opponent is a 48-fight vet, and he's at the tail end of his career. But he's still on a 2-fight win streak. 3-2 in his last 5, but his only 2 losses came from UFC vet Vince Morales and Kai Asakura himself. It will be interesting to see if this is too much too soon for the young prospect. Also, Habali Shadulev is a 24-year-old 11-0 featherweight, and he is 2-0 on Rizin. 9 of his wins come via sub and 2 of them by knockout. This is very well a prospect for the UFC, and only his second fight in Rizin, he already beat Juan Archuleta, who is one of the best fighters in Bellator at both 135 and 145, with a very well-rounded game, also a training partner of TJ Dillashaw. After outstriking and avoiding sharp counters from Juan, he got him to the ground after an awkward exchange, almost falling through the ropes. After getting his back, you can see how good Habali truly is. Faking the Sulev stretch, which is a leg lock that attacks the hamstring from the back mount, making Juan forget about his arms to defend his leg, Habali quickly switched to the armbar for a round 1 sub. It will be very interesting to see if the UFC signs him after the New Year's Eve show. Lastly, with the veteran Horiguchi looking to make one last run at the title, he stated he will only be fighting at flyweight. He fought for the UFC title against Mighty Mouse, and he only lost to the best bantamweights in Bellator. But there was a big size discrepancy, so I like the fact that he's focusing on flyweight. He is also teammates with Pantoja, and he is one of the last people in Rizin to beat Kai. He also stated that he would fight Pantoja for the belt. With the UFC desperate for contenders at 125, could they look to the former title challenger if he can get a win on New Year's Eve? Thank you for watching the video. Let me know what you think is going to happen with the atomweight division, and do you think the UFC will continue to bring over stars from Rizin? Leave your thoughts below, and please leave a like and subscribe so you know when I post next.